What's going on, everybody? That was terrible. What's going on, everybody? Johnny Man's here from Full Tilt. Racely is in the building with us.
We're together. Never before seen footage of two mates, two icons of one YouTube channel meet to go over a very important aspect of the bike fitment and setup.
We're back in the shop. Unfortunately, the local track Rum River BMX is currently under construction as they do their new track layout. However, we will be back over there with some videos, so let us know what type of content you guys want to see and check out the new track layout and all that stuff.
Keeping it rolling.
Anyways, for today's topic, we are going to be talking about wheelbase. We figured we'd use this time to get a little nerdy, nitty-gritty into some bike setup stuff. Fair warning, this is going to have a pretty good amount of personal opinion, but we're going to do our best to keep it factual and let you guys know everything that you need to know when it comes to dialing in the wheelbase.
All right, so today we're going to cover the four main points of wheelbase. What it is, how does it apply to riding a BMX bike, what does it mean when you're riding and actually using the bike on the track, and which way you guys should set your wheelbase up. So covering the basics of what wheelbase is, it is simply the distance between the front contact patch of the front tire and the rear contact patch of the rear tire.
So as you can imagine, when it comes down to wheelbase, basically the further apart the wheels are, the larger the wheelbase is going to be, and the closer the wheels are, the smaller the wheelbase is going to be.
So wheelbase essentially affects three different things: steering speed, the stability, and the overall responsiveness of how your bike operates going in and out of jumps.
So in summary, a shorter bike will feel more responsive to turn in, basically be able to turn a little bit quicker, whereas a longer bike will feel the opposite, but it'll be more stable, especially at higher speeds. Okay, so now how does this actually apply to BMX racing? The shorter wheelbase may sound tempting at first because of that keyword, more responsive, but keep in mind that this only applies to turning. It doesn't mean that it's more responsive out of the gate or over the jumps. A short wheelbase usually correlates with riding a smaller bike, so instead of riding a double XL, riding a single XL, or having the rear wheel slotted closer towards the front of the dropout. Doing this shortens your wheelbase, basically bringing the wheels closer together.
So like Johnny said, with having the wheel closer to the front of the dropouts obviously makes for an overall shorter wheelbase. When having a shorter wheelbase, this is going to provide the bike to be a little bit more twitchy and have easier maneuverability and be more on the other side of the spectrum, having a longer wheelbase is going to provide more stability out of the gate, but it's going to be a lot harder to manual through the jumps and those long rhythm sections out there.
So now that we covered the basics of a short wheelbase versus a long wheelbase, let's start to provide a little bit of recommendations for which way you should go. So in this section, we're going to get into a bit more personal opinion, providing each of our own recommendations for how you should set up your bike. Generally speaking, when it comes down to BMX racing, you're going to want a longer frame. That stability is going to help you, especially at the higher speeds. Think about supercross hills and as the tracks have gotten faster. So personally for me, having a longer bike, I find that yes, it does take a bit more effort to maneuver around the track. However, I feel like my margin of error is a bit bigger. Whereas like with a shorter bike, if I push a little bit too much on a manual, I'm more likely to loop out or make a mistake. So I generally feel like setting the bike to a bit of a longer setting or a longer wheelbase is going to be more beneficial in BMX racing. How do you like to set up your bikes?
Well, pretty much everybody on this channel knows how I like to set up my bikes. From the Terra build to the Quartz build, I'm going to try and get this thing as long as possible. I don't ride a 4XL by any means because that would just be way out of the spectrum of what I need. But me being an OG Nick Long fan and growing up watching him ride a bike that was, you know, longer than most stretch limousines, I always had a peculiar reason on why I wanted to set my wheel as far back in the dropout as possible so that I, you know, had a less likely chance to wheelie out of the gate. And I have a relatively taller standpoint on my bike, so it's not as hard for me to manual through jumps and pull manual, pedal manual with all of the features that having a longer wheelbase provides. But it is harder for me to run, let's say, a little bit taller of a handlebar or change the front end height setup and still get that same performance out of the gate without carrying my wheel or riding it on, you know, basically a wheelie to the 30-foot line. So I started stretching my bikes out a long time ago so that way I could get better stability. I would later overcome the manualing and being able to actually operate the bike around the track in good pace, but I would be able to get the whole setup proper and how I liked it by having that longer wheelbase.
So having that front end taller for you threw off your settings. So you like the bike to be a little bit longer, wheel all the way in the back, have a longer wheelbase, and keep it lower.
Yeah, originally the reason I started moving my wheel all the way back personally was because I was wheeling, and at that time I was running 8.5-inch bars. So over time I started moving the wheel back and back and back, and that worked, but it seemed like every time I would get more comfortable out of the gate with my wheel being, you know, in the center or 3/4 of the way back to all the way back in the dropout, I would just overcome that and be able to still wheelie out of the gate. So that's when I basically maxed out the back end and started moving towards, now on the quartz you'll see that my stem is flipped upside down. I run a 60 mil stem, just essentially getting the overall ride of the bike as long as possible. Even though that stem doesn't affect your wheelbase, having that extended length out over the front not only stops you from, you know, having more of a chance to carry the wheel, but it gives you a little bit more room to move on the front end of the bike, not just the back end of the bike.
And that's a really important point that you made, talking about the stem. A lot of people will tend to stretch out their stem, and a lot of the things that we're talking about with the longer wheelbase has a similar impact to running a longer stem. But do keep in mind that running, let's say, a 60 mil stem on this frame actually doesn't impact your wheelbase. Now, that does impact your steering. Generally speaking, when your stem is a little bit longer, it's going to feel a bit more lax. It's not going to be as responsive, just like a longer wheelbase, but it's not actually impacting the wheelbase itself. We've had some people who have said, oh man, I always love riding a double XL with a 54 mil stem, but then I went up to this triple XL with a 48, and it should be about the same, but it doesn't feel the same. And the main reason for that is because, yeah, the rider area is the same, but now your wheelbase is different. Because with that triple XL, you took the top tube, and instead of your front wheel sitting right here, it sits a little bit further forward. So again, same rider area, but now the wheelbase is different. Now for you, you said that you don't really like riding the quadruple XL, but you ride the triple XL with a 60. So for you, I'd assume it'd kind of be the same thing. You know, you like the wheelbase of the triple XL, but the length of the quad.
Yeah, so the only reason that I really say that is, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the rear end on a 4XL quartz at least is longer than any other of the, like the double XL and the triple XL in the lineup. So that actual rear end ends up being longer, and there is a point where a guy like me's lower back starts to give out. So you guys are going to, for all of those trying this at home or experimenting with some of the ideas that we're throwing out here, beware that the longer you make the rear end, it's the more overall work that you're gonna have to do to get the bike to carry the front wheel out of the gate to still get a powerful gate. So I don't ride the 4X because yes, the rider area is great for me. I could ride it, but between already having to do everything that I can to manual with my wheel all the way back in a triple XL, not only is it hard to ride around the track for maneuverability, but putting all of that force out of the gate really takes a toll on a guy's back when you have a super long rear end. So a lot of people can take note of this, why, you know, Nick Long, I don't know the exact size that he rides.
It was a 17-inch rear end with like a, I think a 21.75 top tube, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this frame, and it has pretty long dropouts. This is the Radio Terra frame. We actually posted a video of us building this whole thing up, so that'll be linked somewhere down below. Be sure to check that out. Anyways, this frame has pretty long dropouts compared to most other frames. And this one actually maxes out at 16. So the Nick Long Signature Haro, that one was 17. So we're talking a whole other inch added onto the rear end. And just looking at top tube lengths, think about how long an extra inch would be on your top tube. So yeah, like for you with your triple XL, you know, some people will just say, well, why don't you just take the rear end and instead of running it all the way to the back, you'd run it further forward and then it would be similar, but you still have to account for that added wheelbase that comes in at the front. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting how seemingly you could have the same rider area, but yet the bike would still feel different. So hopefully this kind of provides a little bit of clarification for some people struggling with their bike setup. Yeah, I mean, wheelbase is a super important thing to consider.
No matter what, this is a big effect on how you perform around the track out of the gate, no matter what your wheelbase and your overall setup lengthwise is going to determine a lot of factors when you hit the racetrack.
Okay, so now kind of bringing this back together. When we talk about a shorter wheelbase, we mentioned having that more responsive turn-in, right? So some of you shorter wheelbase fans might be wondering, why are we so big on the long wheelbase, when BMX racing still has turns? But one thing to consider is, yes, we do turn in BMX, but it's on a berm, and a lot of times you're leaning the bike. It's very rare that we're actually taking the handlebars and fully turning them. So the benefits of having that shorter wheelbase kind of aren't felt in BMX when it comes to actual turn-in. Because again, like I said, you're leaning most of the time. Like, when's the last time you actually fully turned your bars like 90 degrees in a turn?
Well, that one time that I took that kid out playing that game of foot down, I turned pretty hard, but he learned what the benefit of having a long bike really was that day. So, but yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up kind of why you would want to set your bike up long. I know we kind of harped on our setups because we're pretty similar, but that also doesn't go against having a short setup. A lot of people benefit from having more control over the bike, especially if you're newer to the sport. If you're younger and you don't have a ton of skill, you want to make sure you're covering all the bases. Set your bike up a little bit shorter. Don't make it so hard for yourself to ride. If you go home and are like, oh, I saw this YouTube video where these guys made their bikes as long as possible, and then they did 100 gates and blew their lower back out, like, that's not going to help you progress in the sport. We're here to see everybody get better, so try different settings, see what works best for you. If you use that shorter wheelbase, it's going to help you. You might not turn as fast, but you're going to be able to manual a lot easier, and jumping is probably going to be just a smidge easier to get that back wheel over, so you're not 50-50 case and everything out there. But yeah, Johnny, I think we pretty much summed it up. You want to tell them how they might be able to adjust their setups if they want to try it out?
So yeah, absolutely. If you're looking to adjust your wheelbase yourself, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. The easiest one is going to be adjusting the rear end. So if you have a bike with a sliding dropout style, again, like this Radio Terra, you'll have movement here, so you can set it to the back. It's going to give you a longer wheelbase, or you can set it further forward, which will be a shorter wheelbase. Another way, more expensive way, is going to be buying a different size frame. Like we said before, if you take this top tube and move it in, that's going to bring these two wheels together. Even if your rear wheel stays in the same place, that's still going to shorten up your wheelbase. Another thing to consider when you're looking at different frames is the fact of actual head tube angle. This is going to be a bit of a rarity, as pretty much all head tube angles are about the same. But if you have a frame with a slightly different head tube angle, that's also going to impact the overall wheelbase of the bike, regardless of the frame size, because now instead of the fork coming down straight here, it's going to come out a little bit further or be a bit more underneath you. So again, those wheels are getting closer together. Like we said before, a stem is a great way to adjust your rider area, but doesn't actually impact your wheelbase. This is also something that is good to play with, and maybe we will do a whole separate video talking about stems by itself. But when it comes down to wheelbase, generally the main thing that you're going to use to alter it without having to buy a completely new bike is going to be moving that rear end back and forth.
With all of that said, there is one feature that's coming into play with a lot of modern bikes, and that's a fixed dropout. So a lot of you guys are looking at the geometry charts, hopefully, and double checking exactly the lengths of like a frame that we sell is the Supercross Vision, or another one that's not in our lineup, the Mabo HSX frame, offer fixed dropouts. So the nice thing about the Vision is it does have the flip chips, same as the RSX frame that they just released. You can take the flip chips and you can put them, I believe it's a 1/2 inch in the front or 1/2 inch in the back, and you can gain that wheelbase that you're looking for, and you still have that adjustability that this video is trying to explain. Now,
but what is a fixed rear end? Like what actually? So this one's sliding, but what does fixed mean?
Yeah, so fixed means essentially that you have drillings in the side of the frame and the wheel cannot move. So benefits of that would be your wheel alignment when you put the wheel in the bike is always straight, right? If you're running V-brakes, you never have to toe in and out with them. Everything stays set. Same thing with all of your disc brake mounts and everything. When you pop the wheel out and put it back in, that mount stays exactly in the same place, and you're never worrying about, oh, the wheel's a little bit too forward this way, wheel's a little bit that way. It also helps with chain tension, because a lot of the bikes, most of the bikes all come with built-in chain tensioners. So you can have more adjustability with your gears, and you can also have a reliable system that you don't have to, like on, you know, let's even say the Terra, or like multiple of the new frames that have the built-in chain tensioners, you have to loosen the chain tensioners a little bit to get that chain off or to get the wheel to move. So
with that fixed rear end, it's basically guaranteeing that not only is your wheel always centered, but you're keeping the same wheelbase, even if you change gears. Because that's technically one of the downsides of the sliding, is that, you know, if I run a 47-17, my wheel might be here. And then if I run a 49-18, you know, the wheel's going to move a little bit. It's going to be almost impossible to get it exactly set. But
yeah, absolutely. So it removes the consumer at home's ability to, you know, play with these settings that we're talking about. But if you make sure you read your geometry charts and know all the facts about the frame before it comes to your door, then, you know, fix could be very beneficial. If you're a person, you know, kind of like me, I'm always changing my setup. It doesn't matter. I will, you know, add a link into my chain, pop a link out. It doesn't hurt my feelings to change my gears and add a link in my chain. Whatever it is, I always have the tools at my benefit. You know, another more expensive option to adjusting your fixed dropout could be with your fork rake. So different forks come with a further dropout. So essentially the center line down the fork and how much the wheel offsets out from there is your fork rake. Different forks have different setups for how far the wheel actually sits off of your center line for the steer tube to the actual front axle. So make sure you check those out before you go and make a big purchase to change your wheelbase by changing a fork. They're all beneficial ways, and you can do it with frames that have fixed dropouts. It's just a little bit more tricky than something that has a full adjustable sliding dropout.
Kind of like with everything else in BMX racing, there's pros and cons to each. You know, the sliding, you can kind of change your wheelbase on the fly, but that does bring in a bit more inconsistency and trying to make sure your wheel's straight and all that other stuff. And then same thing with the fix. The fix, you know, your wheel's perfectly straight, but it's a lot harder to adjust that wheelbase should you ever want to. If you took this bike to a skate park, obviously aside from it being carbon fiber, people are gonna look at you crazy because your bike's super long compared to freestyle bikes. So why are freestyle bikes always shorter? Or like even the bikes in the past for BMX racing, why does it seem like race bikes are so much longer now?
Well, I guess this is 100% based off of just my experience with actually, you know, with riding at a skate park or going there. Like we said, with a shorter wheelbase, your maneuverability of the bike is much better. So at the skate park, you've got a lot of tight corners, bowls, copings. If you take a stretch limo like this out and you try and, you know, get yourself out of the bowl with your front wheel over the, you know, 16 inches before the back wheel comes out of the bowl, you might run the risk of, you know, going OTB, or especially when you're down in your carbon corners or hitting stuff on concrete. It's a little bit better to have the shorter rider area and that shorter wheelbase, just because you can have better control over the bike. When you're racing, you're trying to have that control but go as fast as possible, so you have to find that right mixture, where at the skate park you're not necessarily just trying to go all out speed, you're trying to hit the jumps, concrete, bowls, whatever obstacles you're looking at there. Everything's a little bit shorter and it's not as high paced, not as high speed. So you're gonna get that better feel of the bike, and you're gonna be able to hit all of your marks at the skate park with something a little bit shorter in wheelbase. And then obviously if you want to give yourself more rider area, you see a lot of freestyle riders ride with their handlebars, you know, lean forward over the front of the stem. They don't have huge long stems, 60s or nothing, but they have their handlebars leaned out over the front, Chicago style. So.
Plus trying to do a 360 or any type of rotation on a longer bike is going to be harder the bigger the wheelbase is. I've never done a tail whip before, but I imagine trying to do a triple tail whip is going to be way easier on a smaller wheelbase than if you've got a stretched out triple XL race bike. it's just going to be able to rotate a bit better. So, but even when in freestyle, you know, you're going to have some riders that are going to have a longer wheelbase than others, and some that are going to ride a super short wheelbase. So this video isn't about, hey, go out, get the biggest frame possible, longest stem, stretch it all the way out, make it as big as possible. Those bikes do look sick, don't get me wrong. But it's all about just kind of teaching you guys some of the nuance in bike setup, and could be a new thing for you guys to test out and try out for yourself. Again, it's going to be personal comfort. Like, I think right now your rear end on your quartz is a little bit further than what I'm running on my quartz. So even though we both kind of like the same setting, Race is a little bit further than my setup. So it's going to be different no matter who you are, but the most important thing is to go out there and try it and see if you like it. Again, hopefully today this is kind of providing a bit of insight for you guys on understanding what the products are that we sell and how they impact your riding, and helping you be able to find something that's going to make you more comfortable on your bike. Because if you're comfortable, you're going to have fun, you're going to ride it more, and hopefully be faster.
We're pretty much just going to close her out there. I think we've overloaded you guys with enough information to go out and do your own science tests at home, and how you can possibly change the setup and the feel of your bike to help you go faster, or, you know, get that double manual you've finally been looking for, or however you want to change your setup to better your riding.
And yeah, just to kind of summarize things real quick, you know, remember that the longer wheelbase is going to be a bit more stable, and it's kind of designed more for racing. The shorter wheelbase is going to be a bit more responsive, but generally speaking, in racing, from our opinion, we feel that the longer bike is going to be better for that application. Anyways, be sure to let us know what you guys think about today's video. You know, we're trying to experiment a bit more with some of our content, from the riding videos to even this one getting a little bit more techie. So if there's a certain video that you want to see from us that we have yet to put out, be sure to let us know. We'd love to hear the feedback of what you guys are interested in seeing. As I mentioned before, if you want to check out us building this Radio Terra, the link will be down in the description below.
Like, comment, and subscribe so that I don't starve this week.
Please.
Thanks from all of us over at Full Tail Bike Co. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
See you guys.